Right, let's get right into it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a topic that affects millions of people, but somehow it's still barely understood. We're talking about a kind of psychological abuse that works from the shadows, creating this trail of confusion and damage that our society, well, it often just doesn't see. Just look at this number for a second. Over 2 million. And get this, that's a conservative guess of how many people are in online support groups for a type of abuse most of us have never even heard of. These aren't just stats from a textbook. This is a massive grassroots movement of people trying to find answers the system couldn't give them. So what does a number that big really mean? Well, it points to a silent epidemic, doesn't it? It shows this huge disconnect between what people are actually going through in their own homes and what our society is even able to recognize. So let's dig in and figure out what's really going on behind closed doors. Now, before we start throwing around definitions, I want to start with the feeling, because for anyone who's lived this, it doesn't start with a name or a label. It starts with this really deep, unsettling confusion, a slow chipping away at your own self-trust, and that terrifying question you start asking yourself, wait, am I the one who's going crazy? This is one of the first big red flags. It's that feeling of constantly walking on eggshells, you know? Apologizing just becomes your default setting to keep the peace. Half the time, you're not even sure what you're sorry for, but you just know an argument is always right around the corner, and you'll do pretty much anything to avoid it. And this is really the heart of the psychological damage. You have a conversation, something happens, and you know what you saw, you know what you heard, but later it gets twisted around so skillfully that you actually start to question your own memory, your own sanity. We're not talking about a simple disagreement here. This is a deliberate rewriting of your reality. And maybe the most heartbreaking part of all this is the way you can lose yourself. People who used to be so full of life, so confident and outgoing, they find themselves shrinking. They stop talking about things that make them happy. They bite their tongue instead of sharing an opinion. And they just become this shell of the person they used to be, all to keep that fragile peace. This quote from a survivor just says it all, doesn't it? It's like being in an invisible prison. You're stuck in this thick, confusing fog, and the very person who created it is standing right next to you, telling you the sun is shining and that the problem must be with your eyes. So where does all this confusion come from? Well, let's pull back the mask, because we're not talking about the kind of loud, arrogant personality you might picture when you hear narcissist. No, this is something way more subtle, and in a lot of ways, way more dangerous. And this is it, covert narcissism. It just completely flies under the radar. These people don't fight for the spotlight. They manipulate things from the shadows. They can come across as the kindest, most sensitive person in the room, all while they're systematically breaking down the person closest to them. And you can really see the difference here. The overt narcissist, easy to spot. They're the loudest one at the party. But the covert type is the total opposite. They get their power not by demanding everyone look at them, but by engineering sympathy. They play the victim, making you feel like you're responsible for how they feel. And they've got a whole playbook of tactics to do it. You've got gaslighting, which makes you question your own mind, blame shifting, so nothing is ever their fault, the silent treatment, victim playing. Each one is a tool that's carefully designed to control, confuse, and keep you off balance. And these tactics, they aren't just random. They all fit into this predictable, vicious cycle. It starts with this amazing phase of idealization, so-called love bombing, that feels too good to be true. But then it slowly shifts to devaluation and criticism. The abuser isolates you, making you easier to control. Then they might discard you completely, only to pull you back in later. It creates this incredibly powerful and confusing bond. Okay, so we've seen the pattern. Now let's look at this shocking scale of the problem. Why are literally millions of people going online for help instead of to, our established institutions? The answer, it turns out, lies in this huge systemic blind spot. And this chart really tells the story. It's a massive gap between the clinical data and what people are actually living through. Official estimates say narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, affects maybe up to 6.2% of the population. But then you have these 2 million plus people in online groups. It's a totally different story. The real number of people dealing with these behaviors is clearly way, way higher. This creates what we're calling the recognition gap. The number of people looking for help online is more than 300 times larger than what the clinical data would suggest.
That's not a small discrepancy. It's a chasm. It proves our systems have a serious blind spot here.
And here's a huge reason why that gap is so big. An overwhelming majority of therapists, we're talking nearly 80%, say they just haven't been given the right training to see past the abuser's charming or victimized mask. They aren't equipped to spot these subtle patterns, which means a lot of victims end up misdiagnosed, or even worse, they're just not believed at all. Now, this failure to recognize what's happening isn't just some academic debate. It has absolutely devastating consequences in the real world. When the abuse is invisible, the wounds it leaves are often that much deeper, and they take so much longer to heal. This kind of constant manipulation leaves behind severe, invisible wounds. Survivors often get complex PTSD, which is trauma from long-term abuse. They deal with extreme anxiety and depression. The chronic stress actually attacks the body, leading to physical illnesses. And it doesn't stop there. It can cause financial ruin, destroy careers, and shatter a person's sense of self and their ability to trust anyone again. So, what's the big takeaway here? This isn't just an issue for therapists to solve or for victims to endure. It's a blind spot that, in a way, we all share. This whole hidden epidemic says something really important about how we, as a society, understand abuse. And it's this. For a type of abuse that lives and breathes in darkness, shining a light on it is the most powerful thing you can do. For the people going through it and for the professionals trying to help them, just being able to put a name to the pattern, to say, this is covert narcissistic abuse, that is a game changer. It's validation, and it's the very first step toward healing. At the end of the day, this hidden epidemic makes you ask a much bigger question. The gap between what people are living through and what our institutions can even see is just immense. And it should make all of us wonder, if we're missing something this big, what else are we not seeing? What other kinds of suffering are out there, totally invisible, just because we haven't learned how to look for them yet?